We won product of the day, product of the week, product of the month, 1,200 users onto the platform, and learned very quickly that all of that was awesome, but no one wanted to pay for it. This is a really noisy process. Insight is given to us around every corner, whether we want it or whether we don't.
Oh my gosh. And there is a process. It's already documented. All you got to do is learn it, and all you got to go do is do it. It's pretty straightforward, right? You just need to have your thing. Just make a deck.
Yeah, this is so
just
easy.
Do the deck. Say the deck. Practice it. Say it, and then just go talk to people, and it all comes together.
It just happens. And I'm definitely listening to more podcasts about super intelligence and the rate in which it will replace humanity. And I don't mean just like entry level work. I mean like off the face.
Yeah. Hey. Oh, wait, what was that? Is this beer 30 or is this coffee 30? Okay.
I wish it was.
Oh, we're
beer
kicking
30.
this off right.
Yeah. You know what? On the next one you and I do.
Okay.
We'll have to.
Great.
We'll have to
Yeah. Nice. Amazing. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. This is always fun. And by the way, that's what makes the beer 30 comment, viable. I understand that.
Yes.
Especially with me, I guess it doesn't matter that it's Friday. So.
It is 2:06 p.m. on a Friday, right? So this is not unreasonable for.
It wouldn't be. So I have a neighbor. I have a he's a really good friend of mine. He's a real estate agent. And so his weekends are Monday and Tuesday. So it always jars me when it's noon on Monday and Nate's out there like watering his lawn with like a stack of Natty Lights starting to pack,
roasting hot dogs and doing a cannonball into the pool. You're like, what? I'm just having.
I'm just trying to get my mail, brother. Over here.
Nice.
Oh man, all good. Well, how are you?
Cool. I'm good. Quite a month, quite a time. All the things changing. This is the month that AI decided to wake up, which is crazy.
All of our dreams are coming true, man.
Yeah. It is easy. It's easier to code agents. I'll say that. It is definitely.
And I'm definitely listening to more podcasts about super intelligence and the rate in which it will replace humanity. And I don't mean just like entry level work. I mean like off the face.
Yeah. No, totally. Did you read the article that was the guy that wrote the Everything Has Changed?
Yeah.
Like, it was such a good POV.
Yeah, I did. And I liked it. And it was interesting because I've consumed that. And like I mentioned, like a couple podcasts around like AI safety, and transparently for the longest time, I just kind of live life like this where I'm like pedal to the metal. Don't think about it. Like, let's just roll and see what happens. I think for the first time, I'm taking a step back and going, okay, the ground we're gaining is excellent. It's phenomenal. Right. But we are starting to teeter on the edge of the point of no return, right? And I'm all for things changing. I'm all for things evolving. But I also do like being human. I like the idea of my kids being human. I love this planet. I would love for us to continue to exist and stay here. And I might be like a little bit of a doomer right now, but I've heard so many really good reasons for why we should just kind of think about this a little bit more. And the best example or the best like analogy I heard was around like cloning, right? In the late 90s, we as a species like cloned another species. We cloned a sheep, a female sheep, and then we were able to create the exact same sheep, and pretty quickly everyone around the world was like both enamored and, whoa, we should not do that. anymore.
I think this sounds like it's going to be about three of me running around. And I think
100%.
that's like, you know what I mean? What does that mean for me as an ego, as a soul? What does that mean for like, what does that mean for my place in the world and the universe? Yeah, no,
100%, right? And I think, I don't know, because when that happened, I was still just like riding my bike around the neighborhood, picking my nose. So I don't remember anything about what it felt like at the time where something was cloned for the first time. But I do feel like this is similar but different. It's not like everyone had like just a little bit of cloning technology in their home and
yeah.
they could like taste it and be like, but this is great, right? It was happening in a very solitarily
No,
confined environment. Right now,
right.
like, we were talking about it earlier. There are still a lot of people who have not touched and experienced AI, but there are millions that have, right? And so
Hmm.
it feels almost like this immovable force with very potentially, not guaranteed, but potentially, you know, significant consequences.
Well, and I feel like I've always been, I mean, I was going to say slightly obsessed. I'll just say obsessed with like from a technology perspective and where things are. And I dive deep into it. And, it's the first time I heard about blockchain and then, and Ethereum and Bitcoin. And then I bought some Ethereum and then I made a contract and like I want to sort of understand these things at a fundamental level. But this is the first month in which it feels so magic because I think I've created like 12 projects
Yeah.
this week. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying like I sketched out an idea. Like there's a number of them. They're like 80-90% done. And then, but conversely, that means that I know that there are others that are infinitely beyond me in terms of understanding. You know what I mean? So then you're like, how am I going to hang on? How I'm hanging on the side of this truck, and I know it's about to go like warp speed. And do I have enough grip strength? Where's my seat? You know what I mean? Like I'm just trying to figure out how to like, and then how do I also help, my kids, get ahead of it in the way that they're 9 and 6, which sounds like you shouldn't have to worry about it for a while. And it's like, I don't know, if you're not native to this, like if you decide to get native to it 12 years from now, like that's not going to work.
Okay, so what have you guys decided is your parenting approach?
Oh, it's my wife and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum, which means that we make the yin and the yang together. I am the one that like, we would go to the beach and everyone would go down to the beach. About 45 minutes later, I was so bored. I just wanted to go out and play Mike Tyson's Punch Out on Nintendo. And I just wanted to sit out there and play. And my mom's like, we drove all the way to the beach. It's so sunny. It's so beautiful. But yeah, but in my brain, like I'm thinking about how to get past Soda Popinski, whatever. Like I'm just like, that's what's happening in my brain. I can't just be like, you're right. It's so nice out. And so I had this thing and that's what sort of fueled me to want to learn and absorb and get to this place. And I feel like you kind of have to, or a lot of people, especially knowledge workers, are going to have to get to that place where you're thirsty to understand and grow, because if you sort of watch it, it's going to get so fast that it's going to be hard to like catch on later. And so we do a balance. I mean, boys and I play Wobbly Life together and Nintendo, and and we've got a Legion, and we'll play games together. And then we also, my son, and I work on projects with Claude, so he sort of gets the idea. Or if he's like, can you look up on YouTube how to do this thing? I'm like, nope, you can ask Claude how to do it because you already have a Wobbly Life project. And he's like, oh yes. And he's typing out and he's like, where is the magic key or whatever it is. And just even starting to, I think for them, what I'm scared for is I don't want, I know my parents, the computer was not the refrigerator,
Man.
right? For me, the computer and the refrigerator were both sort of native when I was growing up in my like, past my teens. But this is going to have to be native to them. It can't be a thing that they heard about. And so I'm always a little hesitant to be like, let's just let them grow up, and when they get into their teens they can start getting into this stuff that now changes weekly.
Yeah. Holy no.
So anyway,
It's nuts, man. Like we struggle with this a little bit too. Yeah, I feel very fortunate. Both of my parents were um, in tech, My mom was a lifer at Hewlett Packard. And
Mm.
so like, tech was always in our lives, and I think very similarly to you, I spent a lot of time just thinking about problem solving, right? And and being able to do more things with the technology I had available to me. Um, a couple good examples. I at one point tried to build a skate park in my backyard,
Nice.
and hypothesized that it wasn't working because I didn't my plans were not correct enough, but I could build better plans on the computer without realizing it was truly because I didn't have the resources. You can't skateboard on cardboard boxes. Um,
Yeah. Nice.
but but I'm with you, right? And it's totally changed though, kind of the way I encourage my kids and what I encourage them to to spend time on. Where maybe if this were 10 years ago, I'd really go deep on their obsession um with like Legos and like engine
Mm.
and building blocks, and albeit we still do a lot of that and encourage a lot of that because I think that's really great. Um, but now we spend a lot of time like just going, okay, why do you think that happened? Why do you think
Mm.
like more
Yeah, yeah.
like deeper, sometimes abstract, critical thinking thought challenges that I think are going to be really important when you've got all of this intelligence at your disposal, but you're to a certain extent still going to need to orchestrate. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, maybe not, but also
We
like, but
we'll find out.
yeah, if the answer is maybe not, you're gonna need to critically think like, what is the purpose of your life, right? And
And
therefore,
maybe we'll all just be in floating chairs like on Wall-E, sipping on the drinks, going like, "What? We have a pool?" Um,
love that.
I want to hear about Atlas. So this is, the purpose of Zero, and why I started this. When I started Stacklist, I really thought, one, I wanted to sort of document the journey, but also like I'm so curious about this process of I've got a thing in my head, right? I think it needs to be brought into the world, or I think I can solve a problem, or I think I can build something, and you buy a domain name, and then you go, okay, what should I do next? Whatever. But like from that point forward, I think it has always fascinated me, and so I love what you're building with Atlas, and I think what I'd love to know, I guess, starting out, interesting segue that you were said that your parents, were in tech, is sort of some of your upbringing that may have led to entrepreneurial and tech, as a focus.
Well, that's another thing I feel really grateful for my parents for. Um, they were very entrepreneurial, but yeah, I joke about this with them sometimes. They're very caged entrepreneurs, where um, they have all of the traits to be entrepreneurial, but also became adults and became parents in the late 80s, early 90s, where you know you really they really felt like the best thing for them to do was to go get really good but stable jobs, and and be able to provide at all times for what ended up being a 6-person family with very active kids who all did a ton of activities. And it actually wasn't until my dad was 53, 54 that he started his first business. And so and my mom now is like semi-retired because she helps run a farm. And so like they're very, but because of that, anytime we had ideas, entrepreneurial or not, anytime we had ideas, there was no like, hey dude, that idea kind of sucks.
Right. Yeah.
or like or like
Yeah.
like why don't you go do your homework, right? there
Yeah.
was, there was a lot of like, that's really interesting. Like, where'd that idea come from? Why
Yeah.
why do you think that would be important? Do you think other people would find that important?
That's great.
A lot of like really deep critical thinking, and a lot of that um not just my mom, but I hand off to my dad too. He was the inspiration for the Atlas logo. So my dad actually made the NASA astronaut program, and about a week later, my mom told him that she was pregnant with me, and so instead of moving to Houston, they moved to Washington D.C., and my dad got a software sales job selling into NASA, and he reminds me of it often. Uh, but he had that like mathematic engineering training with this like obsession with the uncertainty and unknown of space, right? And it kind of led him into, obviously he was a Grateful Dead fan, and it just led him into like all of this, abstract thinking, and it rubbed off, and he spent a lot of time kind of um, leading me down that path. And so because of that, I feel really grateful that as I grew up, I was able to look at not just problems, but things that I loved, and I did not feel limited by any like expectation or social norm. So transparently, like the first business I started, I was well, if you don't count the just like mowing lawns when you're 11. uh
Yeah.
I
Oh, that was my favorite.
oh
I was
yeah.
good at that. Oh, I make tight turns. I wouldn't leave any little like kind of corner.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
It was excellent when I learned how to like checker the the grass, right? I
Yeah.
charged a little extra for that. But
That's great.
sorry, as an aside, because we started on beer 30. I had a neighbor one time when I was 14 pay me $20 and then asked me like how many racks of beer I was going to go buy with it. And I was like, "Sir, I've never had a beer before."
Oh my gosh.
But so besides that, I start and because my parents were so open to a lot of things, like no one in my family played music, but I played music, where I learned how to play music, and I started a band when I was 12, and we were just messing around in the garage. But by the time that I was 15 and a half, 16, I was in a band that ended up going and playing overseas and touring and traveling and all kinds of stuff. And um granted, it wasn't a very good business. It lost a lot of money, but that when you start a band and think of a band very much like a startup. You have to get through some really shitty times, some empty rooms, some a lot of rejection, and you have to sell yourself.
Creativity and branding and entrepreneurship and hustling and moving gear and like all the
Yeah,
logistics
yeah.
and yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So like it that was and I actually credit my grandfather a lot for this, who was a big support system for me there. He was one of the first ever sales engineers at IBM. They went by a different title at this point, but he thought this was phenomenal. He would tell you like he didn't have an ounce of music in him, but he was fascinated by the business side. And
Hmm.
so him and I would spend a lot of time on that. And for all intents and purposes, like I played music professionally, and I toured, and last tour I was ever on was a headlining Warp tour. Um,
Nice.
but for all intents and purposes, like they were all failures.
Yeah, yeah,
none,
yeah.
none of those tours made money. And I tell you what, like you get a lot of good times and a lot of good memories, but then you come out the other side like 8 years later, and you're like, shit, man, I've got a lot less money than when I started. I could have stayed
Yeah.
mowing lawns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's funny how that will end up, all those things that you tried in those pieces. I feel like all things that you end up bringing to entrepreneurship that you subconsciously and sometimes consciously know that you end up putting into practice. It's super interesting how, especially with starting a business and being an entrepreneur, that you really lean on just about every ounce of experience that you've had in related and non-related fields.
Yeah, I had this conversation with one of our investors the other day. Um, I think especially like in this phase, um, I've got a I've got a good contact. His name's Cam Duty. He runs um he runs Brickyard in Chattanooga, which is kind of like a live-in accelerator, and um, and their whole thing is, it's you got to get through the trough of sorrow, right? And they
Yeah.
didn't create that. That's a I can't remember if it was Christensen or Sullivan. I can't remember whose that was, but but holy mackerel, like, you're gonna launch, you said, like, you buy your URL, you launch your company, and especially nowadays, your LinkedIn's gonna blow up. People are gonna be like, hell yeah, they're gonna choose
Makes
you. Like,
Also, do not tell anybody your idea because they will take it and just like run with it. They can take it and raise so much money
that's
off of
right.
it just off the
Oh
words
yeah,
about the
100%,
idea,
100%, 100%. But what you get through this initial bump, right, of excitement, and that some of that might be just like excitement and vanity metrics. Some of it might actually be like some actual customers and stuff. But no
but
matter,
it's also like it's uncharted brain space even for yourself and that you're always so aware. Just like if you move to a new city, right? The first year everything is fresh and you're like watching everything and whatever. It's when that piece wears off and you don't have money yet or product market fit
100%.
and that or whatever, and so you don't have that juice and that adrenaline of the freshness to sort of bolster you. That curve is just rough.
Oh, and that's where I feel so grateful for the months I had to sleep in the back of a 16 passenger van and like live on $13 a per diem a day.
Wow.
Granted, those were still fun times, right? But like, you take a lot. You said it. You take a lot of these experiences, right? And if you've lived through things like that, there's adversity everywhere. But and by the way, it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to come to you from like this terrible thing happened to me, right? But almost always it comes from that or taking some sort of risk that didn't exactly play out the way you thought it would, right? And like no matter what, your startup will not play out the way you thought it would, and you will hit the trough of sorrow. I mean, it's like fan fiction now to look at these Lovables and the Cursors of the world and like have your head explode and be like, whoa, overnight success. But like you have to really go back and do your research and see that,
Oh
dude, those
yeah.
companies have been companies for like 5-6 years, right? And they're
It
top of
all
sorrow
feels
for
like
6 years.
Cluely these days, right? Like
Yeah.
it feels like the guy that made Cluely was sitting around on his couch and was like, "Ooh, I got an idea," and he sort of like he spends a day or so in hacker mode and then he has this thing and then all of a sudden it's just like he's a Silicon Valley darling and you're like wait, don't take the Instagram version. You have no idea what's behind that, and I guarantee you there's a lot of hustle and other stuff in there, but yeah, it looks like that from the outside.
You know, Reed Hastings had a really good, I don't know where this was, like in a book he wrote or some blog post, but he had a really good anecdote about when he started his first company. He took an investment from his dad. But when he took that investment from his dad, he said, "Hey dad, like, on average it takes 3 to 5 swipes at this to get it right." And he clarified, he's like, "I don't mean like we're gonna, pivot 3 to 5 times." He's like, "I mean, I'm gonna run and build 3 different companies and run them into the ground and fail them, probably before we're at all successful with something, right?" And I think that's
Yeah.
just like completely lost right now. And I think it's an important reminder that, we've got all these great solutions and all these great tools and technology that allow us to do things faster, but we should like think about this in the fact of like, well, it doesn't make us successful more often. It just makes us fail faster. And therefore, perhaps we can get to something successful
Hmm.
a little bit faster.
Yeah.
We still got to go through all the fucking ass kicking to get there.
Yeah, totally. So let's parlay it into Atlas. Like where was the moment? Like what were you doing before? Like before the idea, before the inclination, before the that earworm, that bug got in your brain, and you're like, this is something I gotta do.
Yeah. So this is the third company I've started.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to sell one in the past, and talk about butt kickings. That was a big one. And in that process, I got hooked up with the founders from Pendo. They actually worked out of the same co-working space that I did, and I had a few mentors inside of that company who were helping me through um, kind of like the step down from my last one. And yeah, I feel so grateful for this moment where the leadership of that team was like, "Hey, what are you going to do next?" I was like, "Well, I got to go start another company, man. Like, I just got my butt kicked. I got to prove that I can get out there and actually do this." And they were like, "We we believe you can if you spend a few years, in the front row, learning from a few guys and girls who have done this before, right? And we promise we'll keep you in the front row if you join us and continue to deliver value above and beyond." It's like a handshake agreement. It was, we all kind of said like 2 years and then go out and start another company. That 2 years turned into 10 years. Uh,
A few moments later.
yeah, that's right. You're probably wondering how I got here. But,
Yeah.
but like, I feel so grateful because they, Todd and Chaz, kept so good on their promise. I like to feel like I did the same, but I had the opportunity to lead some of our first sales teams, to build our ops and enablement team, to run our European business, to lead North American sale, parts of our North American business that were very substantial and important. And while all of those were excellent, I got to sit with Todd, like in small pieces, participate in his fundraising, and in much larger pieces,
Nice. Yeah.
get to
That's invaluable.
get to ask him tons of questions. I had access to information as long as I, kept it discreet, that no one else, very few other people in the business had, but purely just because I was learning. I wanted to be a better entrepreneur. And Todd and Eric and Rahul are excellent entrepreneurs. And I also got to, 6 times at Pendo participate in changing our business model. And
Nice.
yeah, not nice. No, it sucked, man.
Nice
Awful.
learnings. Like,
Oh,
it's good to go, but to go through that and come out, obviously, once you do your own thing, is now the optimistic and the optimized path to take.
100%. Well, that, and it was very clear to see, one, like, Pendo was a forward-thinking company. We were working with AI and had alternative business models, before the Gen AI boom. But they were all things, I'm sorry, from a business model perspective, they were things we did in name only because we really couldn't facilitate it, or we didn't have the resource time to be able to build in true, like, usage-based tracking for monetary purposes into our product. And so, like, what ended up being the I don't want to say like the aha moment, because it was like multiple aha moments, where this one was really like, you got to do something about this. Is, we had small little company called Anthropic come in to buy parts of Pendo. Now, granted, this was 2021 or so, 2022. And we had everything agreed to. We had the cost of the contract agreed to. We had redlined everything. We had the only thing we hadn't agreed on was how we would charge them. Pendo's business model at that time worked on a monthly active user basis. Anthropic was coming in to buy more, like, more of Pendo's product for qualitative research, trying to understand how users actually felt about the product via NPS surveys and other things. And so these two things didn't match up, because there were going to literally be millions and millions of users that Anthropic didn't want data on, didn't need data on, and wasn't going to use that data, but we were still going to charge them that way. And so very simply, they were like, could you just charge us based on the amount of NPS survey results that we get? Kind of like pure usage, somewhat of an outcome
Yep.
based scenario. And our teams were like, yeah, that sounds very fair, right? That's excellent. Let us take that back. I took it back to the engineering teams on finance and the sales operations teams, and after some deliberation, they were like, you could ask them to come back in 6 months. That's when we'll be able to support that. We'll start
Oh,
and start the build now. And long story short, we lost Anthropic to one of our big years. I think that's actually a very large contract for them right now. But having worked on that business model, having presented options and opportunities to price like this, just a few months before, and having been rejected, it was like, dude, we got to, like, things are rapidly changing where
yep.
buyers want to pay for software and now so much AI in ways that more reflect the value they're receiving, as opposed as opposed to like seats or access or something along those lines. And nobody is armed and ready for that, right? And so we're very fortunate that Pendo itself is a product analytics solution. It's from a technical perspective, it's extremely elegant. It's wonderfully flexible, and it gave us a great idea and a great blueprint for how to go build something similar into a billing infrastructure type format, into a product where it'll teach you how to price and package. It'll allow you to deploy any business model. So all that being said, it was that was a big moment, but it was really a lot of little moments leading up to that big moment where it's like, okay, this has been a really painful process, and we're still not winning the things that we should be winning. So we should do something to fix that.
I love that because I can even visualize the beginnings of the ideas of Atlas in that moment when you're a startup and the visualization of the case study is basically you're a startup founder or you're selling for a startup team, and the client goes, hey, could we pay you in this way? And that you sort of jump forward to the moment where you can go, yeah. Like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I'll work it out. And that you just go back and that you can just move the pieces around and then just do it, versus being like, we have to deliberate, we have to redo our company, we have to, like, the ability to just like customize a few things in a few ways and just get the money in and then sort of like, figure it out after.
And by the way, like, what was crazy for me is, for the longest time I thought this was a Pendo problem, but I couldn't marry these two things. Where, I mean, Pendo, albeit I worked there for 10 years and I'm very biased. Like, I love that company. I love that product. I love that business. But like, we were so I'll say we were on the forefront of everything. We were super innovative, right? We always pushed the boundaries, right? And I just couldn't make that fit with this idea that this thing, like, this was where we were clunky and legacy and overly corporate. And I was like, that doesn't, so like, let me go see if this is a problem everywhere else, right? And like, yeah, like, we did 110 interviews before we actually launched the company, of companies like Pendo in and around that space. And overwhelmingly, right, people came back and said, hey, we're building new product. It's got some of this new AI stuff in it. We have no idea how to price it, and what we have from a billing infrastructure perspective won't handle it, right? Um, and we would share that Anthropic anecdote with them, and we'd say, "Hey, let me tell you a story. Does this resonate with you?" And almost always, like, I've still got the notepad. Like 90% of the time, people said, "Oh, stop, stop."
Yeah, yeah,
Got
yeah,
three of
totally.
those that, and so it was definitely crazy to me that I just couldn't fathom that this was a Pendo problem. But it was even, I think, more wild when I learned that it was a much bigger problem than just Pendo.
When did you when did you make the jump, or the decision to make the jump to start an Atlas?
I gave Todd, Todd Olson is the CEO of Pendo. I gave Todd the standard 6 months notice that I was leaving to join Pendo. April 2024.
Oh no, that's exactly when I started Stacklist.
Yeah, wonderful.
April 4th.
When you and I were
Um,
just jonesing at the same time, man.
Totally. And I was actually working for a consulting company, and I basically just said, mine wasn't on notice as much as it was like, by the way, I have this thing I'm working on, and if it ever is a thing, I have to go do the thing. So like just know that we're not doing this forever together. Just like that thing will become a thing. So I'll keep you updated. But like that was my version.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a great way to go into it too. Transparency. Big fan of transparency. Yeah, mine was similar. Todd I love, by the way, I bawled my eyes out. Bawled my eyes out.
I bet
I,
10 years you've been
uh,
in that company, in that culture.
I met my wife at Pendant, so it was a big deal. But like, I'll share it. He won't listen, but he'll be mad at me if he does. Like Todd cried a little bit too. But we're very good friends too, so like
Nice.
have him over often. And so anyway, we when I told him, I was like, Todd, and this was in April, I was like, I found the thing and I'm gonna go build the thing. And he replied, finally.
Nice. That's
It
great.
was like, when are you leaving? I goes, September. And he goes, what? Like,
You realize as a
he's
startup,
like, why are
I
you
need
waiting?
as much runway as I can
He
get
was
that's
like, why are you
humanly
waiting?
possible.
Exactly. He was like, why are you waiting so long? I was like, well, we got this $1 million deal that's going to hit at the end of August. So I'm going to stay through that. And he was like, fair enough. I was like, look, I've been here for 10 years. It'll be a shift for the team when I leave. And I want to ensure that the people coming in behind me and the people rising up, like, have a good opportunity, to 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 try to take what's in my head and put it in theirs. I was like, dude, strap me into a chair and just like zap it all out of me. Like, especially in startup world, 10 years of tribal knowledge is unbelievable. I mean, we're gonna quickly move into an era where it doesn't matter, right? It's all gonna be on our Mac minis and shit. But like, um, but I did want to make sure that I left the place as well as I could. It was partially financial, but also partially like it had given me just such a good ride, and Pendo gave me so much that that 6 month period, that September timeframe, was really what worked well for my boss and where the quarter break was, and it just aligned best for the company as well. And so um yeah, non-standard, I should say, 6 months, but
Yeah, totally.
yeah, but it was good. I felt awesome about it. I hope that there are more entrepreneurs that come out of Pendo. It's a very entrepreneurial company. Hired a lot of entrepreneurs, really encouraged people to have bias to act, to build things internally. I think I might have built like 3 or 4 solutions at Pendo with Tiger teams that still drive tons of value internally today. And so I'm excited. Yeah, I really hope that that more come out of Pendo.
That's great. So you set off on your journey. You've got 6 months where you're sort of you're doing the side build thing, right? So you're starting to put things together. And what was the moment when you were like, where were you at when you left Pendo? Where were you at in the process from an Atlas timeline perspective?
So had we had like the bare bones of a product built. This was right as the AI IDs were becoming good enough, but still really sloppy. It
Hmm.
was like, yeah, I could punch in what I want, but I still have to do the same amount of work just from like a QA perspective. Um, fast forward to where we are right now, and you just told me you were like, "Oh, I just want this. I'm gonna
Just
go drink coffee. I would come back and it's
Totally. QA yourself and don't tell me to look at it until you have fixed it. And I did that this morning. Like it was circling on itself a little bit, and I realized that I was in haiku instead of in Opus. And so I switched to Opus, And I said, do me a favor. I was like, I've been circling around haiku for the past like 10 minutes. And I was like, can you just go check this and test it before you send it to me? And only send it to me if it's fixed. And so it just sort of like did the thing that it was like, I got it. And I clicked it. I was like, that's it. And then I moved on. Like, it's so crazy to be
Tell
able
that
to
guy
do that.
haiku he's fired. Okay,
Yeah.
like,
I love haiku for the like the really quick cheap stuff because you'll get done with a session though and they're like this session cost you $18. You're like all right, so like all the operational stuff where you're like move these files around and tell me what's in here and just read through the file or
we
whatever.
had
But
a
yeah,
we had a team meeting the other day, and one of my I was bragging about my ability now to write code, and he has since nicknamed me Haiku.
oh nice.
But yeah, so we had this bare bones product built. Really what it was a back end event ingestion engine. By the time I left, it was an invoicing engine. It was a very minimal front end, like really no features. What we were working on was this. We kind of, I would say September to April, was really hard, really, really hard because we went immediately into trying to sell companies that we were most familiar with, like the Pendos and the Airtables of the world. Those were the
Mm-hmm.
companies that at Pendo we had been working with, and we had spent a lot of time validating this idea with them. So a lot of our early build was back end focused. How do we scale up to handle billions of events, which we did successfully, but we somewhat overlooked the political nature of a business model and pricing and packaging.
Mm-hmm.
And the other area that we had spent a ton of time and for whatever reason just kind of looked beyond. Maybe it was like trauma that we had blacked out, but pretty quickly we started successfully testing this stuff with massive amounts of data, and we would go into the pricing teams, the amoeba, the committee that managed the business model, and be like, we're ready guys, let's do this. And all of a sudden 50 people at once were like, we're not doing that, we're doing usage, we're not doing that, we're doing credits, we're not doing. And we were just like,
Yeah, yeah,
oh no, like, whoa, dude, we really fucked up here. Like,
yeah.
we don't have a lot of money. We can't, like, this is going to take us 9 months to try to sell one of these deals, and maybe we can get two or three of them. But like from a startup perspective, we're not going to get the at bats or the learning that we need if we start up here. We just, we're not a Silicon Valley darling. We were great at Pendo, but we weren't the founders. Like, no one's pumping $10 million into us on an idea. We're happy to
Right.
be really scrappy. So selling into these guys and girls is just not viable. And so, and it was a 2-quarter learning process, right? And so we made a really hard pivot, or decision to hard pivot our ICP around March, beginning of April, to say, you know what, we value repetition, we value learning right now. The most important thing we can do is get people into the platform and using it, regardless of the scale we built it for, so that we can start understanding what is most important. And at the same time, I was really starting to shift my opinion of like which companies over the next 5 years are actually going to survive. And I started
Mm,
looking
yeah.
at these new like vertical specific AIs that I think just have a much better chance of crushing it than some of these slow, low growth public software companies that we originally were focused on. And um so we and by the way, we hadn't commercially launched the product before this point. We were primarily working in like a pretty open stealth. And so in June on Product Hunt, we launched commercially the product for the first time. We won product of the day, product of the week, product of the month. We within the span of 6 days put 1,200 users onto the platform, um, and learned very quickly that all of that was awesome, but no one wanted to pay for it.
Yeah, that's great.
So it was all of the vanity stuff that you hope for, right? All of like
Hmm.
we had it on one side, we were like, dude, now we're moving. Now we're a real startup. And on the other side, we're like, okay, but has anybody actually paid for it yet? And no. No one actually paid for it yet.
Totally.
Yeah. So it was, that was and so then we had to embark on the like kind of like the next iteration, which was like, okay, there's something here, right? There's something here, but we need to find the epicenter of solve the pain, but in a way that is valuable enough that people will pay for it, with a group of users that will pay for it. And admittedly, I think we're still very much in that like post product hunt phase. We spent again a quarter kind of focused on that builder class to learn that okay, those aren't going to be. And so now over the last 2 quarters or so, we've really focused on pre-seed, seed, a little bit of Series A, vertical specific software companies, providing them not just with like billing infrastructure and insight on their business model, but also like consultation and pricing and packaging workshops and accelerators. And we're finding real real great foothold in this spot where companies are um they've got customers. There's maybe they haven't found product market fit yet, but they're doing
Hmm.
transactions and they're starting to realize that my business model might be an element of this product market fit thing. And I really need, if I want to cross the chasm, I really need to figure this piece out too. And so that's where I wouldn't say we found product market fit by any stretch. No way. Like I ran our ICP by my good friend Lindsay the other day, and she just goes, "Oh my God, what are you gonna sell to the whole world?" She's like, "That's way too big, dude."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really appreciated the candid feedback. She wrote me like a whole paragraph, and at the very end goes, "Okay, but this one part that was cool."
Nice.
Like, okay. But yeah, so we're very much still in that process of like, okay, how do we? By the way, shout out to Lindsay Rios. She's an excellent fractional CRO if anybody is in need. But we're still very much in this phase of like, okay, who are we best for? And how do we go and monopolize that very small segment of the market that we can own that and jump to the next larger concentric circle of users.
That's awesome. I'm interested. So when did you start the idea for starting the accelerators?
So we worked with a like a marketing consultant. His name is Alper Moskalou, and he's out of London. Sometimes he's out of Saudi, or he's out of the Emirates the other half of the time. And this guy is excellent, man. And it was really his idea. To He was like, hey, you know, you guys are great coaches. Um, we for the whole year we've been transparently like monetizing a customer success motion, and but more doing it on a one-off basis. People buy the Atlas product, and we encourage them to buy, an Atlas accelerator. And so not only are you getting everything from a software perspective, but we're essentially going to come in and replace, a $500,000 Simon Kutcher engagement. And most of our customers can't afford Simon Kutcher at this point, so it's a great deal for them. They're like, heck yeah. And I remember a call with him where he goes, so I have this idea, but it would mean doing like 10 to 14 accelerators, every month, every 2 months. Like, are you up for that? And I was like, yeah, of course. This is like one of my most favorite things to do is sit with customers and learn about their business, and puts us in touch, in touch with what they're trying to do a heck of a lot more. Um, but and so transparently, he was like, okay, I can't remember where he got the inspiration from, but um, he did see this somewhere else. And he was like, his big thing, and this is what stuck with me. His big thing was this. He's like, some of the best marketing right now is obviously like education based. He goes, but it's all based in fear. People are afraid of AI. People are afraid it's going to take
Hmm.
their jobs. People are overwhelmed by AI and where to start, right? And his firm belief was, especially entrepreneurs who are so good at tackling their fear are still have a lot of that fear that they're going to reach out for help with, right? And we've definitely identified that. Trying to understand how to, from a business perspective, scale your AI product is a really big challenge right now. Whether you are a startup or an enterprise company, this is a brand new technology with new costs, new margin, expectations, probably brand new metrics that we look at instead of things like ARR. So it's massive
Right.
shifts inside of the business. And there's a lot of avoidance to like the inevitable tide coming in because of this fear. And so Alper's strategy for us that he led was, how do we take down these walls? How do we answer this fear with really great content, programs, things that put us in the forefront, one-on-one with the customer whenever possible. These are not novel or brand new things, but I think the way that Alper foresaw going about this was different, was unique. It meant we had to do a lot of things that didn't scale immediately, right?
Hmm.
But transparently, when you are in it for the long haul, when you're in it for the long game, when you're building infrastructure, you have to be ready to do a lot of things for a long period of time that maybe don't scale. And so, all the credit to Alper, man. Like he crushed it here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where do you see Atlas going?
I've spent a lot of time on this week. Um, I think I've got two perspectives here. And admittedly, like, I'm working on picking the one that I've got the most conviction around. So you'll get both of them. The first is, I think, pretty generic, where we actually see a slower adoption, or we start to see a diminishing returns, or maybe like, I'm forgetting the law, but like, where you can only improve something so much, and we start to see that happen with our models, and we for whatever reason we don't crack super intelligence or whatever it is, and what we get is really great technology that makes us like 100 times more efficient, but there's still tons of human involvement with the act of buying and selling. At which point, like, Atlas is going to continue to sit at the center of that and help teach people how to psychologically appease their buyers when it comes to selling their goods and services, and very immediately build the infrastructure that's needed to execute everything
Hmm.
from sale forward. I think that's the least. I think that's probably not as likely to happen as a world I see where the agent market, the market where trillions upon trillions of agents are constantly at work, interacting, interchanging, and transacting, is
Yeah.
is like an unfathomable multiple size bigger than like the economy as we know it today. And like very much what I see needed in that realm is a trust layer, very similar to the way like Visa is a trust layer for our transactional world, right? Visa isn't actually a payment processor. It's not a
Right.
payment network. Visa, you swipe a card, and it's the trust layer that says that person buying is who they say they are. They have that money in the bank account, trigger the bank account for the purchase, right?
Well, and a big difference between Apple and Google, right? The Google Play Store is sort of open to anyone, and Apple, you at least sort of know that this has been vetted to a degree. So
100%. Exactly. And so I think like agents are going to need the same thing, but it's all going to be very different from like what we're used to being identified and validated on. Like, first and foremost, the most basic thing is going to be to for a buyer and a selling agent to have parameters and requirements that they work within, right? And this is like the pretty simple like agent RFP and a selling FP or whatever you want to call that, right? But those agents are going to come, and instead of like a psychological negotiation, they're going to look to try to find the intersection of what equals the best deal for both parties. And then there's going to need to be a execution layer that not only bills and invoices but ensures that whatever has been agreed upon can be tracked, validated, um, you know, uh, um, go into arbitration if needed to, um, arbitration if needed to. So, like in that world, I see Atlas being that trust network that helps agents, negotiate, arbitrate, validate what's actually happened, to be able to pay, and then execute all of those things, or all of like the monetization infrastructure, post engagement, post service delivery. So that is a little bit of like a you know futuristic take, but I see that
I love it.
in like the next 2 to 3 years. So
Yeah. No, I love it. That's great. What if you so as a parting gift to either aspiring or early entrepreneurs, if you had to go back to the week you just knew, or the first week that you dove into building Atlas, like what's one thing that you would tell kind of that version of yourself?
yeah, I think this is a really noisy process. I think we get taught so often to seek so much data and so much validation. And by the way, it's like given to, feedback and insight is given to us around every corner, whether we want it or whether we don't.
Oh my gosh. And there is a process. It's already documented. All you got to do is learn it, and all you got to go is do it. It's pretty straightforward, right? You just need to have your thing, just make a deck,
Yeah, this is so
just
easy.
do the deck,
This is so simple.
say the deck,
Just do the
practice it, say it, and then just go talk to people, and it all comes together.
It just happens. Like I would go back and I would tell myself like, hey, dude, so many of the things that you're thinking about and feeling right now are right, and you just need to shut everything else out.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Admittedly, there's been too many times where I have just been like, nah, but that person's really smart. Maybe I should think about that a little more.
Oh, totally. And then I've had that actually a number of times where I've thought like, oh, this is the expert, this is the person that really knows, and then later a future version of me goes, they actually didn't know what they were talking about. Like, and so but there's so many different versions of you that are learning that through the process. And I call bullshit on things like, I've been told things like, the idea that you had for your startup in the very beginning, it's going to change 1,000 times. And it's not even going to look like what it was in the beginning. And every day I'm like, nope, I was right from the beginning. Like, I'm telling you. And all it is that I am standing where I should have been, and everyone's coming this way, but everyone's pointing to me going, why are you standing all the way over there? You're a weirdo. You know what I mean? It's like, so I agree. I love that idea of how much noise. I think what I've tried to do also is just make enough quiet and silence, or give myself enough distance, or be
That's good.
sort of easy on myself to, like, if it's noisy and I can't seem to make a decision, or I can't think, I'll go take a nap, and then I'll like watch something on Netflix for a while. You know what I mean? Like, I just separate. And I'm like, it's because there's too much noise that I can't. I'm not able to listen to that sort of voice in my head.
I love that. I would take that advice from you now. I'm gonna take that advice from you now. I'm gonna go do a crossword puzzle. That's what I'm gonna.
Now it's beer 305, right? See,
I'm gonna.
that's all I got to do.
You know, I've got a few more calls, but I'm not gonna be apologetic about drinking on them. Dude,
Amazing.
Well, awesome. I know I've taken you over, man, but I'm so grateful.
Yeah, no, this is great. Thanks for coming on. Always a pleasure, and I appreciate the stories and the insights and the conversation as always.
I appreciate your friendship, man, and always love talking to you regardless of what we're talking about.